Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for for joining the discussion this morning. Um, uh, this is a very special poet that we're going to be talking about this morning, Jane Kenyon, who died in 1995 at the age of not quite 48, and who was a very remarkable poet and um, and partly remarkable for her being an understated poet. Um, so there was nothing flashy or even self-promoting about her, and yet she's really come to be regarded as one of our really one of the greatest, one of the best, and most, and certainly most endearing poets of the, of the century, American poets of the century. And so I'm just sort of curious, um, how many of you here this morning know Jane Kenyon's work?
Well, you
Oh,
know,
good, good. Oh, great. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so, um,
Yeah, I have
so
a friend.
lots of you. And this is a poem that it's one of my favorite poems of Jane's, and I think it 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 has it has a lot of the qualities in her work that I really particularly admire and really love. So, can you, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Mhm.
no one's saying speak louder or closer, closer to the microphone. Okay, so let me start by reading the poem. Frost Flowers. Sap withdraws from the upper reaches of maples. The squirrel digs deeper and deeper in the moss to bury acorns that fall all around, distracting him. I'm out here in the dusk, tired from teaching and a little drunk, where the wild asters, last blossoms of the season, straggle uphill. Frost flowers, I've heard them called. The white ones have yellow centers at first. Later, they darken to a rosy copper. They're mostly done. Then the blue ones come on. It's blue all around me now, though the color has gone with the sun.
I'm listening.
My sarcasm wounded a student today. Afterward, I heard him running down the stairs. There is no one at home but me, and I'm not at home. I'm up here on the hill, looking at the dark windows below. Let them be dark. Some large bird calls down mountain, a cry astonishingly loud, distressing. I was cruel to him. It is a bitter thing. The air is damp and cold, and by now I am a little hungry. The squirrel is high in the oak, gone to his nest, and night has silenced the last loud rupture of the calm. Um,
Where to start?
where to start? Well, let's start with the title today. What do you, I don't know, what do you expect from a poem called Frost Flowers?
I expect change.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Can you expand on that a little bit, Nick?
Well, those two words aren't commonly seen together. After
Right.
all, frost
Right.
is in the cold winter and flowers are in the warm spring and summer. So right there, I sort
Right.
of look for change and motion as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Hume, is that, does that mean your hand is up?
It
For
does.
what? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hume? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you're
I'm
muted.
sorry. I was just agreeing with Denise that it was wonderfully read.
Oh.
But no,
Oh.
I didn't. I
Thank
wasn't
you.
going to say anything. But I mean, there's something wonderfully evocative about the idea of flowers and frost together,
Right.
and you know the idea of sort of something dying that's beautiful, and I don't know.
Yeah, well, we're not prepared. We don't know where this is going to go, but
Right.
there is something sort of evocative and unusual, um, a little odd about that combination at the
Yeah.
very beginning of the poem.
I almost think of a floral
Okay.
display across the window in January.
Mm.
To be surprised, of course, if it's not about that at all.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. I see that.
It's disequilibrating, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's right, and that's
And
really
it sets us up for the motion that's going to go through the poem.
exactly, exactly. Um, uh, Susan. Yeah.
Well, I was expecting sort of a nature poem with a reference to Robert Frost.
Uh-huh. Uh, that sounds completely legitimate to me. Yeah. Yeah. And certainly a nature poem. And it begins as a nature poem.
Yeah.
Sap withdraws from the upper reaches of maples. The squirrel digs deeper and deeper in the moss to bury acorns that fall all around, distracting him. Or let's look at everything except the last two words. So if you're expecting some sort of nature poem, what are you getting in that first stanza?
The fall.
Yeah. Yeah. But
It's also past the fall because the maples aren't in glorious hue. Their sap has withdrawn from the
Yeah.
upper.
right,
Right.
right.
Well, it is the present.
I'm sorry?
I think it is the present tense.
Yes, right. Yeah. It's happening now.
It's a
And Hume, is that again? Oh, Catherine, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And somebody else has her hand up. Mary Elise does too.
Okay, Mary. Catherine. Oh, or
There's opposite directions going on in a nature poem. at the very beginning, and that's a surprise.
Yeah. Mary, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to add that it does feel like it's fulfilling that idea of a nature poem. And even maybe Frost Flowers, it gives me the impression of something that's going to be very delicate. I don't know, maybe that's just my own thing, but I'm picturing Frost and so far it seems to be fulfilling that, but it builds in such a way that the opening of the second stanza is just a knockout. The last thing we're expecting is, I'm out here in the dusk, tired from teaching and a little drunk. I love the way she's set up that opposition. So,
And yeah, I completely agree with you. But I also, just to go back for a second, I think that's right about these directions, these opposite directions that the images are going to the upper reaches of the maple trees, and then down deeper, and then I really like this line break. I think it's very very evocative. The squirrel digs deeper and deeper. So we're going up, and then we're going down deeper and deeper in the moss to bury acorns that fall all around. And there's the sort of nature image, the fall image, the trees are, you're right, already losing their color, the squirrels really getting ready for winter. Just acorns that fall all around, distracting him. So even before we get into that, I think, kind of almost shocking beginning of the second stanza, this something else is some new element is added, I think, is added to that first stanza. What do you I don't know, what do you make about the having that stanza end with distracting him?
Lloyd, before we get started, I would just love to ask people so I don't miss anyone and everyone gets a chance to speak, and we have such a large group. If there's an icon at the bottom of your page, just raise your hand so I know that you're waiting to add a comment, because I want to hear from everyone. So,
Me too.
okay, thank you. Go ahead, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah. So
I've never been able to find what I'm supposed to push on to show that hand.
Thank you.
Let's see.
It's under reactions at the bottom of your page. There's a smiley face. If you see that, do you have that on your?
Yes.
You have
Or
to,
a
you
heart.
Oh,
have
yeah,
to adjust the screen to show that link, that
Oh,
whole
I
row.
see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
okay,
Thank
sure.
you.
Good. Yeah, I can never find those either. So, and I just forget about them. So again, what about the distracting him coming at Bonnie?
Bonnie, you're muted.
I was just applauding the figuring it out, but I think it's about bounty. I think even though the fall is falling, there's a future. We're projected forward from the acorns through the winter to the next oak tree, and there's lots of sort of meditative attention to the detail in there that she then takes that big leap to personify the squirrel a little bit.
Okay. What anything in particular about the distracting him?
I think Wendell was going to add something.
Okay. And Catherine, you have
Well,
your
it's an anticipation of the student. You know, what was distracting was the student looking out the window. What we don't, I've ended up very curious about what it was the student had done, but
But we don't know. But we don't know anything about the student yet.
right, we don't know anything about the student yet. But reading through it this time, I was thinking, oh, something's distracting the squirrel. There's
Right.
and that's it seems to me that that's an anticipation of this world is everything's knit together here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Catherine and then Denise.
Distracting him reminded me of Elizabeth Bishop's The Sandpiper.
Oh, thank you.
And
He is obsessed.
yes, that's right. And so it introduces, through that association, a note of high anxiety.
Yeah. 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 Denise. Yes.
Thank you. I just pulled some frost flowers out of the vase on my kitchen table that I cut from my garden.
Oh,
Because I can visualize them so much. You can see that, for one thing, they're not the usual color of autumn flowers, which are often the oranges and yellows and, brown chrysanthemums. They're very spring-like. They're delicate, they're pale in color. The blue ones are too. I didn't bring any of those up. So it's another incongruity. And I think changes the visuals for the poem. And I think that the distraction of the squirrel is an anticipation or reference to the distracting thoughts about the student and, the edges of other awarenesses that run through the poem.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
I think Nick and then Joyce.
Oh, good. Yes. Nick and then Joyce.
Okay, just focusing on distracting and the fact that we don't know what's coming next in the poem. I just read it as the squirrel being with acorns coming down like hail practically, which is what happens this time of year if you go out for a walk in the woods. And I think of the poet saying, there's too much going on in my life. I can't manage everything.
Yeah.
This poor squirrel doesn't know which acorn to bury because there's so many.
Joyce.
I think that the idea that this is something that's going to foreshadow what happens later is very accurate, because the squirrel is trying to do work and it's not working. He's trying to bury those acorns for the winter, but he can't, because there's one over there, there's one over there, the acorns are falling. And so the squirrel can't do what it intends to do. And I think that's going to foreshadow the feelings of the poet in regard to the student.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I completely agree with that.
Lloyd,
yes.
I was just going to say, it seems to me that that's the first word of a certain kind that does something to the squirrel, and our reference to the squirrel, it humanizes the squirrel.
Yeah.
You never think of a squirrel as being distracted or having that kind of mental response.
Right. No, that's right. So it's really, I mean, we really think, you look at the title and there is this sort of odd ambiguity in the title, and you read the first stanza and there's lots going on, but there's really very little to make you think this isn't just a nature poem. And then something happens at the end of the stanza that kind of puts this little twist into your perception. And then this amazing thing happens in the next stanza, which is, I would say, almost totally unexpected, except for that word distracted. I'm out here in the dusk, tired from teaching and a little drunk. And, well, that doesn't seem awful. It's, I mean, and there are lots of poems about teaching, but maybe not so many about being tired from teaching. And being a little drunk. It's startlingly honest. I mean, that whole line, I'm out here in the dusk. So she's putting herself in this scene. She is the human being in this scene. The squirrels are not quite human, though they're capable of being distracted. But she's also part of that scene, and she's the human element in that scene, and she's being very human and very forthright about what she's feeling. I mean, we don't know the whole story yet, but it's very startling to me. It's very startling that this personal, I wouldn't say confession, but admission, that she's admitting that she's also part of the scene and that she's tired and a little drunk. And it's very, to me, it seems very endearing that she's being so forthright, that she's being so honest about her feelings. And they're not threatening, they're just a little matter of fact and as I say, startling. I'm out here in the dusk. So there's the scene. The maples are, something is moving inside of those maples and something is distracting the squirrels. There's all this activity. And then in the dusk, there are these wild asters, last blossoms of the season, and they're straggling uphill. What, Catherine, I see you nodding.
Yes.
What about straggle?
Yes, they're tired too.
Yeah. Yeah. Frost flowers, I've heard them called. I, 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 there's something just very, it seems to me so endearing about, I'm not the expert. There's a kind of modesty, but she's heard this. Someone has said it and she remembers it. The white ones have yellow centers at first. So things are really moving, things are happening. I've heard them, the white ones have yellow centers at first. Later they darken to a rosy copper. They're mostly done. Then the blue ones come on. So this, what do you make of those? It seems to me kind of, I don't know, like a kind of continuum of transitions. So lots of things are happening and lots of things are changing in a very quiet way. There's nothing, I mean, I'm tired from teaching and a little drunk. Well, that's a sort of dramatic, but it's not, I'm bombed. I'm very drunk. I'm falling over drunk. It's just a little drunk. But all these things are happening. And I'm I would call your attention to these, or I should be asking you, what do you make of these line breaks?
Lloyd, there's a lot of people. Joyce
Okay,
is
Joyce. I deferred to Joyce always.
I just wanted to give some context to this
Oh,
and
great.
about I've heard them called. This poem was probably started fairly early in Jane's living in New Hampshire. It's one of the earlier poems. So she was a transplant from Michigan. So it's not something she would have called them necessarily. She's
Right.
heard them called.
Right.
So I think there's also this sense of being kind of out of place and out of sorts that is part of that as well. And I just wanted to put that in context because she did teach at Colby Sawyer College for a bit, very, very early in her life with Don in New Hampshire. And then she didn't teach again until until the Bennington seminars. So I just wanted to put in context another reason for I've heard them called, and another little sense of disquiet that may come from those words.
Yeah. So Don is the poet Donald Hall, who was Jane Kenyon was married to, and they're living on the farm that was Don Hall's inheritance. I mean, that was the family farm. What was it not, Joyce? Oh,
yeah. In fact, yes, that was something. It belonged to his grandfather.
Right.
So yeah, it was a place where he remembered spending summers during his boyhood. It's something he wrote about a lot. And he left a tenured teaching job at the University of Michigan to move back there with Jane after they married.
Yeah.
Denise, and then Susan, and then Jim and Susan.
Thank you.
Thanks. And so interesting what Joyce has to say. Yeah, I was just going back to the darkening of the centers of the flowers as an anticipation of the dark windows.
Yeah. Yeah. Yehudi? Susan, Yehudi? You're muted.
Wait, there. I find almost all the imagery, all the references to either decline and descent. Everything is down, starting from above on the trees. And of course, we're going to come to the stairway and the rest of the trees from the height and sitting in the dusk. Even the dusk is a descent.
Yeah.
Seems to me that is a pervasive reference in the poem.
Yeah. Was there someone else?
Yeah, me.
Oh, Jim, yeah, sorry.
Well, two things. One is I think she's drunk because of the environment. I mean, she's taking in the environment. I'm not sure that how much of it is alcohol. I mean, she's sitting among this natural setting, and I found I took it, it was as much that as the alcohol that was making her drunk.
That sounds legitimate.
But the other thing is that as I already talked to you, is this issue of line breaks.
Yeah.
Some of them seem to me incredibly arbitrary, and it was interesting because in your reading, some of them you obeyed and some of them you ran through. And I'm always curious as to the decision about where these lines are broken. Some of them make great sense to me, like it's blue. You really want that to be an image by itself before you get to the rest of that sentence. But on the other hand, there are others that just struck me. Yellow centers at first, but it doesn't, to me, as you read it, you said yellow centers at first, which is in fact how we think of it. And I'm curious as to the decisions about line breaks.
Well, I'm. It's a subject near and dear to me, and uh, and probably my feelings about line breaks are very much embodied in the way I read the poems out loud. And I think some line breaks are really oral, that you really hear them, and some of them are really visual, and that you don't just stop at the end of the line, but your the way your eye moves, um, and and it it does seem to me that the line breaks in this poem are very skillful and very subtle, uh, and that they move your eye, if not necessarily your ear, uh, from the upper reaches. I mean, I wouldn't want this first line to be sap withdraws from the upper reaches of maples. I wouldn't want that to be the line. I want to have that quality of reaching the upper reaches of maples. The squirrels dig deeper and deeper, not deeper and deeper, which seems dull and flat to me, but that in a subtle way, that line break is really is moving your eye down the page and 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 into the ground. When you have your hand up.
Wendell and then Cami, you're both muted.
Oh, oh, great. Yeah.
Well, I in the mood is they're mostly they're mostly done, and then the blue ones come on. It's blue all around me now. I mean, this is a kind of the blues kind of melancholy, a celebration of melancholy.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. 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 I hadn't thought about that, but I accept it. Cami, yeah. Welcome.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Lloyd. It's fun. The white ones have yellow centers at first. Later, they darken to a rosy copper. There are a couple of things about that. One thing is that pause after the yellow centers kind of makes you think, oh, okay, so they're white flowers with yellow centers. I get it. But no, it moves on and it changes. At first means we're in time, and also that we're sliding into something else, which is later they darken to a rosy copper. So that's one thing. The other thing about it is just the closeness of the observation, you know, that even if she hasn't been here for a long time, she has been out there in that garden and she has actually noticed what all these colors are, when they happen, and what comes after what. So just a couple of.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you. Nick, yeah.
Just a question. Maybe I should know, but I'm not sure. Do we know whether this poem was written before or after she was diagnosed with leukemia? Because it was afterwards.
Much
afterwards.
Much before, isn't it, Joyce?
Yes, much before she was diagnosed with any of her illnesses.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the words dusk and all those descending things can't relate to that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Don't push it there.
Okay.
Mary, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know this until now, but just the way that all around the blue all around me now, I hadn't seen the parallel so strongly between the speaker and the squirrel with the acorns falling all around.
Oh,
And
great.
after
Yeah.
it's the blue all around. Yeah, it's kind of lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's blue all around me now, though the color has gone with the sun. And I, I find something uncanny about that. That she's, that it's, I don't know, it reminds, Joyce, you're going to think this is slightly cuckoo, but it reminds me of Baudelaire, that she is sensing the color, she's aware of the color, but she's not seeing it. And she's putting the color on the page and putting it in the poem, and she's saying, I don't see the color blue, but there it is. She's surrounded by it. So, I, 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 I don't know. Does that
I
does that
love that.
does that make sense to you?
I think it does. And, it also marks the turn of the poem inward. We've been looking outward, and now we move inward.
Yeah. And then here we are, halfway through the poem, a little more than halfway through the poem, but halfway through the poem in terms of the number of stanzas, although it's a little more than halfway through the poem in terms of the number of lines. My sarcasm wounded a student today. And Susan, that's exactly where my hand is. Can you can you describe your gesture and what does your gesture mean?
I found it extremely poignant and painful. And after dusk and darken and those visual line breaks and Gone with the Sun and her saying she's a little drunk, and then the baldness and the horror of what she has done and the way she just puts it out there. There's no hiding it.
Right.
I didn't mean to, but I did, but she just says it. And it was so painful. I could hardly read the poem after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Wound, yeah.
Yeah.
Sarcasm and wounded. It's also, she's very sort of tough on herself too. And then, I mean, we've all we've all had teachers who have done that.
We've done it.
We've done it. Yeah. And that there's a just a startling self-awareness and ruthless self-awareness. Very simple, but boy, are we, I mean, everything in the poem is setting that up, but we have no idea that that's what it's setting up. I think reading this poem, however many times I've read it, I am always shocked by that line. My sarcasm wounded a student today. There's no line break there. It's just, there it is. Afterward, I heard him running down the stairs. Oh, that, I mean, that's, she's picturing the whole scene. And it feels devastating to me.
Wendell and I think Catherine wanted to add to that.
Thank you.
Wendell?
Wendell,
It's
and then
the, it's, you can feel him, she's moved the child to tears. He runs down the stairs. I mean, that's how serious the wound was. I've got to get out of here. The energy of that line following I wounded him. That's what I felt. I mean, that's when it struck me. What struck me was the emotional energy of the student to get away from the injury.
Yeah. Catherine?
Yeah, the sound heard him running is the beginning of a series of sounds that we'll listen to in these next stanzas that follow it. But as shocking as my sarcasm is, it's the beginning of a crescendo, I think, towards I was cruel to him. That's even more direct and more ruthless on herself.
Yes.
So my sarcasm is still in the third person. You know, it's like when I'm a psychologist, when patients say, you know, part of me wants to da da da, you know, as this it weren't me. So as I say, I think it's shocking there and wounded, and yet it gets worse. I mean, her own indictment of herself gets worse and more direct.
Yeah. There is no one at home but me, and I am not at home. Oh, Bonnie, I love the fact that your head is shaking back and forth, listening to that line.
I think there are others in front of me who wanted, it's just so great. It's just so great. It's so simple and so brilliant. That's all. I sit amazed.
Who is ahead of Bonnie? Your movement caught my eye because I was feeling it
Let's
inside.
see, maybe Michael?
Oh, Mike, yeah, hi. Yes, Michael.
Oh, you're muted, Mike.
Yeah, well, what astonishes me about it, you get similar moments of this in James Joyce. It's very psychologically accurate, and it's a moment of reflection, which I think is what brings it into our being able to identify with the poem. It almost imitates exactly how the mind works in its silence, and how something important you have done or said needs reflection. And a good lesson here for the cell phone addicts is that when you cease the search engine and you become passive and you're looking at nature, you're filtering things and you come into a thing that we call reflection. Instead of actively searching all the time and gobbling information, you let the mind sit back, and voila, here comes a moment that's very important. You said something that offended somebody. Hello, hey, you're not so smart after all. You don't know everything. You've hurt somebody's feelings as students. And yeah, I mean, what everyone's feeling is, God, this deep inner shame, or whatever we have, because we all mess up. We all do it. And we all get corrected. We all don't just make mistakes, we make big mistakes. Each and every one of us do. And it's defining in us whether we acknowledge those things and set ourselves back down. Lloyd was talking about her. She's humble. She speaks frost flowers, I think they're called. You know, she's not a know-it-all, which brings you very much into her lap, into her warmth, into her confidence. Somebody who knows everything. I mean, you know, we all know those people. And so yeah, it's a poem of extreme sensibility and timing. The way that line comes out, I'm like, sorry, you're like, well, what are the, you know, but
right.
when you're in with Stephen Dedalus does this, he's going through his day or whatever, things are going, but he's stopping to think, and then out of nowhere, here comes this reflection or something. So yeah, I mean, I guess all I wanted to do was to maybe highlight the importance of sitting alone, sitting without a mechanism going, watching things happen. And it's part of human nature. You have nature out there.
Right.
This is human nature, interaction. Something I said affected a young student in a certain way. That's what we call human nature. So,
Yeah.
so
Thank
those were the importance of reflection. It's a very, very powerful point, but it's a point made in the process, not just by saying this is this and this is that. It's
Right.
the whole movement of the poem has to convey the importance of what happens here.
Yeah, really living through that process.
Most
Susan.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, a comment and a question. My response to the line, I'm not at home, after she's revealed what's happened is I don't have it together. I'm not at home in myself. And also that she says this happened today, like she's gone home and written the poem after this event.
Yes.
That's hard to believe something so crafted could happen that quickly, but maybe.
Well, we have to believe it. I mean, we don't. For me, for one, I can't imagine Jane wounding a student. I mean, I knew her. She was
I see.
such a
But it's so immediate. It happened today. We're with her still experiencing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no one at home but me, and I'm not at home. And it just seems to me every ounce of metaphorical juice that you can squeeze out of the line, the phrase, I'm not at home, I think we are encouraged to do because of where this comes in the poem. I'm up here on the hill looking at the dark windows below. Let them be dark. I think something new happens at that moment also. Anyone want to talk about that? I think there's there's a new element of language in the poem. There's nothing in the poem before this that sounds like let them be dark. I don't know. Anyone? Nick, yeah.
Nick.
I read it as her saying, I'm not part of that community. I don't care if their lights are on or off. I'm not going to go down and knock on their door and say,
No,
let's
but
talk.
it's her house.
Yes.
It's her house.
At the dark, she's only looking at her own windows, not the town.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
There is no one at home but me, and I'm not at home. I'm up here on the hill looking at the dark windows below. Oh, I think it's just her house, but I see what you mean, but I hadn't pictured it that way. I don't know, Joyce, what do you would you weigh in on
Yeah,
this?
you couldn't see the town from the location that she's describing. She would only be able to see her own house.
But how is the reader supposed to know that?
Yeah, but then it's
Well, because I think she just says it's her house. She doesn't say houses. There's no plural there. It's just this one place that she has a relationship to that's very intimate. And I think that that's how a reader would know. Of course, a reader wouldn't know where she was specifically on the hill, but I think the language of the poem gives you a good clue.
What do you?
I don't want to push this too much, but it's dark windows. It doesn't say my dark house. Look at the dark windows. Oh, that could be multiple houses, unless you know the geography, which the reader.
Yeah.
That's,
no, I
that's all I
think
can say.
Yeah, I think your point is legitimate. Unless you knew some kind of biographical fact, you may very well think that. I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. Whole lot of difference. But what about
Denise,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
oh,
Denise. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Denise and then Ellen and Jim.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Denise, go ahead.
Hold on, Jim.
Jim.
Oh,
Yes. I'm sorry.
go ahead, Denise.
Okay.
I was waiting for Denise.
I see them, let them be dark, and I'm up as all a reflection of her sarcasm, wounding. It's the effect of what she's done. The bird cried, aloud, distressing. Everything has become dark and painful after this comment. And she says directly, I was cruel. And so I think this is a painfully psychological, experience that she's gone through as the poem has gone on.
Okay.
Was
Denise and then
sorry?
Bill?
Denise and then Bill.
Yes, the let there be light, let there be dark. It seems an inversion of the biblical let there be light, which is sort of the ironically creates a parallel world she's creating, which is in decline, as somebody said. Wendell said that, and for me, it has a note of irony, but also it's a reference to the home she's not at home in, which could be part of her newness to New Hampshire that Joyce mentioned.
Bill, thank you, Denise.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to say about let them be dark exactly, but something which occurs to me in relation to the poem as a whole is that although, as I think Joyce said, we do obviously move from the outer world to the inner, particularly with the reference to the incident in the classroom where she was nasty to a student and now reproaches herself. But in one sense, we haven't really been in the outer world before that, because everything, almost everything, I think is really inferential. We tend to think that it's a poem which moves from observation to reflection on the inner world, but the observations have themselves already, in a sense, been inner, in that, if we take the first couple of lines, sat with drawers, that's not really observable. That's an inference from the absence of leaves. The squirrel's digging deeper and deeper. She probably doesn't see a hole getting bigger and bigger. She just sees the movement of the squirrel's whatever they are, paws, hands, going on and on digging, and infers the depth of the hole from that. And then that whole process becomes more explicit when we think that she's observing the blue, only for the blue to be revealed to be a color she can't see. And when she refers to the flowers before that, we're in a sense moved inside her mind and to the language she possesses to describe them. and we're sort of moved on that basis to think about the way in which observation is constructed by the language which we possess to describe the data of experience, the primary sense data, so that in a peculiar way, the poem is, as it were, deconstructive of the opposition between observation and internal reverie or self-communion. That opposition breaks down as we think about the observations. And indeed, that I suppose does apply to the dark windows, in that she looks at the dark windows, but the windows, in fact, their darkness is a sign of their invisibility. Again, it's something which she seems to see, but doesn't in fact see. I don't know whether this is all adds up to anything. It's just something which occurred to me. I'll leave it there.
Brilliant. I think it does. It does indeed. Yehudi. Yeah.
Oh,
You're muted.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that line, "Let it be dark," is really an acceptance of a kind of reality, no matter how grim, of an end of a cosmic force that is not to be resisted.
Yeah. A kind of acceptance, but a kind of something larger than that even.
Yeah.
And Denise. No?
Yeah.
And then Joyce.
Bill pretty much made the point about acceptance that I was thinking.
Yeah. Joyce.
I wanted to go back to your pointing out that "Let it be dark" is different from any other line in the poem, and that it's an imperative, it's an order. And I think this poem also has something to do with power, because this teacher, the speaker, has power over the student, has power to harm. And I think in that line, she is taking power and asserting her power. Let it be dark. I order it to be dark. And in what follows, uses her power to really come to grips with what she's done and realize that her power has harmed, that it's also changed her. When the large bird calls down mountain, it distresses her. I mean, a cry astonishingly loud by a large bird could sound thrilling, but in this poem, it's not thrilling, it's distressing. So she has taken this power and decided to use it this way to hold herself to account. And I think the beginning of the poem is also a little bit about power. And the sap can't help withdrawing from the maples. The maple has no power to decide whether the sap is going to withdraw. The squirrels don't really have any power to decide whether they're going to hoard acorns or not. And so I think this is also a poem that has to do with human power and how it's used.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Mary.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to point, I'm still sticking with the "Let them be dark." Just a couple, my reaction is that it seems to be such a stark closing, that there's no reparation, there's no redemption. It's almost like a little, it strikes me as kind of carrying a little sense of fatality. And also that it suggests she's not going back to the house. She can't go back, right? There's no return, which I think suggests that she has been changed, permanently. There is no going back. There's something really powerful, really stunning about it. I love that she used the imperative there. Anyway.
John, thank you. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'm just sort of stunned by the uncanny connection between this section of the poem and the section of Yeats's poem, Lapis Lazuli, of the Chinaman on the hill. And there are these common images. There's the blue of the flowers that's everywhere. It's the lapis lazuli. They're looking down the hill and then looking up the hill. And there's a long-legged bird that's on this. And there's a bird here. And and there's real, but the Chinamen are not distressed, whereas the speaker here is really distressed. And I'm just wondering, what kind of connection, if any, is there?
Before we, Catherine Black is trying to chime in, and I know she's
and
in
Cammy.
the UK right now, so I'm not sure if the connection is good, but Catherine, did you?
Yeah.
And then Cammy.
It's a funny kind of imperative. It's hortatory. It's this. Let it be dark. It's a big, just in grammar, it's just a different kind of subjunctive because it's in the third person. You don't want to know that. Anyway, hortatory, and it's a big out to the world. And she makes that comment, and a bird replies, big sound. Okay, she's now out of her cocoon where my sarcasm wounded the student. And she immediately gets to, I was cruel. She puts herself into that world where people see and feel. And it seems to me that's quite a large transition. And when she talks about the squirrel in the nest, is it a Yeats poem about the hare in its form meaning nest in that poem? I think so. I can't think why I would know that, but anyway.
I don't remember. Cammy? Thank you, Catherine.
There are too many things exploding in my head, but from what people have been saying, but I'll just say to the question of power, what's kind of most amazing there are a couple of amazing things. One is that she's that frank about her own bad thing she did. She just says it absolutely as frankly and as naturally as her observations of nature. It's kind of like, these flowers have this color and I was mean to someone. So I think the real amazing power of the poem is in her facing herself in that way. In other words, painting herself truly to the best that she can. And I also think that, I think to Mary's point, that's where redemption is in this poem. The redemption is in her ability to face herself and to not hide things or try to justify, to not even say, oh, I ran after the student and reassured him and I'm going to have lunch with him next week or whatever. Instead, it's just, my sarcasm wounded the student. And then that detail, I heard him running down the stairs. She doesn't explain that. That holds all the meaning of the terrible way that he reacted. It's just so naturalistically presented. I was cruel to him. It is a bitter thing. That is the truth of the matter. So I think the power is in the facing the self, and the redemption is in the facing of the self.
Thank you. That's, yeah. There's let them be dark. Then there's the large bird, a cry astonishingly loud, distressing. And I mean, in a way, the world is distressed. The whole world she's distressed, the student is distressed, but the whole world, the whole natural world is distressed. And again, something interesting and different, it seems to me, is happening in the language in that transition. Yeah, you Susan Yehudi, you're muted. Okay.
Point out that the squirrel is distracted, but she is distressed.
Stressed. Yeah.
Significant difference.
Yeah.
With that the nexus of the distracted and distressed.
Yeah. Yeah. And 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 that it's a world of distress. I was cruel to him. It is a bitter thing. And that um that the language there also seems different to me. A little bit like let them be dark. It is a bitter thing. It's not colloquial. In a way, the so much of the poem is very colloquial. It's it's a poet really sort of talking about an experience and what happened and what she's surrounded by and what she's looking at and what she's hearing. But then there's something kind of larger. I don't know. It's not, I'm bitter about it, or it makes me feel bitter, but it is a bitter thing. And I hear a real difference in the language. Gail, you're unmute. You're muted. Gail, you're muted.
Oh, Gail, hit your space bar, please, so we can hear you. We
Hit the
can't
space bar.
hit it twice because we can't hear you. Let's see if I send you a message.
Hit the space bar twice.
No, we can't hear you. Let's see. Oh. Oh, okay, Gail, you're so close. Oh, I hear you clicking something. Maybe your volume is down. No, you're muted.
No,
I'm sorry.
it's on mute.
Do you see the red line at the bottom on the left?
There it
There you
goes.
go.
Now?
Yes.
You can, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was cruel to him. It is a bitter thing. The air is damp and cold, and by now I'm a little hungry. I like the rhyme of little and bitter, but also she's turned a corner because she's now told this story.
Yeah.
She feels remorseful. The tone has changed throughout the poem, you know, from her observation of nature, which is hints what's coming, and her terrible act, which for anybody is a terrible act, but for a teacher is, you know, it's so painful, and she couldn't make up for it fast enough before he ran down the stairs, which is also devastating to hear. But
yeah,
but she's actually recovered enough to write the poem because now she is a little hungry.
Yeah, she was a little drunk at the beginning of the poem.
Right.
Now she's
Right.
a little hungry.
So this poem moves in its diction and in its meaning in this short narrative to a real conclusion, which is not really to forgive herself, but to sort of go on, but be a little hungry and be human and have to eat something.
Yeah. Yeah. Bill and then Nick.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't want to go on about this inner outer thing, but it is a bitter thing, as it were, takes the emotion of bitterness and turns it into an outward thing. So if previously we were seemingly observing things, but in fact we were still inside the mind because we were dealing with inferences, now we're seemingly dealing with an emotion, but it's actually been objectified and turned into a thing in the world.
In the world, yeah. Yeah. Nick, yes, please. You're muted. Nah,
In
yeah.
addition to the parallel that was just drawn between a little drunk and a little hungry, there's another parallel. The squirrel is now high in the oak, not digging deeper and deeper in the moss, and high in the oak, he's gone to his nest, which is a cozy, natural place to be. So there are opposites in this poem. And I think those are two very clear ones. Both the squirrel and the drunk are a little hungry.
Yes. Yeah. Was there someone? And then everything sort of returns to I don't know, an equilibrium or just an acceptance of what's there. And night has silenced. So night is active, is having its effect. It's not dusk anymore, it's now night, and night has silenced the last loud rupture of the calm. So some large thing has happened which is not happening anymore. Everything is returning to some sense of what it is. It's a very mysterious ending. Yeah.
It's interesting because it's so much a story of her painful remorse.
Yeah.
And then there's an acceptance of her human error at the end when she says, the squirrel's returned to his nest, and night has silenced the last loud rupture of the calm. It's not so much she forgives herself, but she accepts her humanness.
Yeah.
Jim and
It's so
Susan.
painful in the middle. I mean, her pain at what she's done is so beautifully described.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love how she puts rupture and calm in the same line.
Yeah. And rupture is a kind of, it's almost violent. And but it ends with calm. Sue Larson. Yeah, your hand is up.
Yep, you're muted.
Sue, you're muted.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you, husband. The large bird.
Yes.
Is she in communion with the large bird? Is it her yell? Is it her shriek?
Well, kind of. She's projecting it. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought at that hour it's probably an owl, probably a barred owl or a hoot owl, and it's, kind of just like a shriek of agony, but that's her letting out the bitter thing.
Yeah. 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 Bonnie, thank you. Bonnie?
That's very much what I was going to say, that and the inner and outer, the bird does the cry for her.
For her, yeah. Yeah. Catherine?
Yeah, two things. One is that A Little Hungry has desire in it and it looks to the future. Whereas A Little Drunk is the past. It's she got home tired and annoyed with herself. But I have a question really for the poets about the use of ellipses in a poem. That's a surprise. It could have been a period in each of those. We wouldn't have paused to wonder about it. But ellipses, I thought, is this cheating? I mean, ellipses puts the ball in the reader's court, whereas the poet takes the ball into her own court. That's what she's doing. So anyway, that is a question.
I love ellipses. Well, it's just that.
Do you use them in poems?
Well, but look at the. Joyce, did you want to respond to that?
I can say something about Jane's ellipses, which she used a lot. And I think she started using them after Lewis Simpson, and she really admired his use of ellipses, and she used it a lot. And I think it is a way of showing how the mind works and how sometimes the mind just kind of trails off. And I think I think the use is effective, very effective in this poem.
I think
that's helpful.
I mean, I think the ellipses at the end of the penultimate stanza. Some large bird calls down mountain, a cry astonishingly loud, distressing. I was cruel to him. And that's really, I mean, I think that's really potent. And that it's not there's a loud cry, and then she sort of brings back her sense of cruelty, but that the cry is leading to her return. That's the path of her return. It's not the cry isn't just there as a thing in itself, but as the thing that's leading to her self-examination again. And that at hungry, the air is damp and cold, and by now I am a little hungry. And then there's a kind of path to that image of going back. It's a path forward, but it's also a path back to the squirrel. It's not a definite ending. I think a period there would be I don't know, maybe
less
too matter of fact even. And by now I'm a little hungry. The squirrel is high in the, but it's now I'm a little hungry. The squirrel is high in the oak. It's really her, as Joyce said, it's her train of thought, and it's moving. It's in motion.
That's so helpful. I mean, what you're saying suggests that the ellipsis is kind of a visual cue.
Sure.
In the page, when we read it on the page, I don't think you could pick it up different on your ear. But you said connecting to the next stanza, or connecting, or a path. I mean, all of those are,
sure.
That's interesting, but the visual cue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim. Oh, Yehudia, sorry.
Like breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
That's great. Right. Yehudi?
Yes, I wondered about the uh, about the poetic or musical aspects of the poem.
Mm.
So I decided to read it out loud to myself, and I found
Mm.
it astonishingly fluent. There is no lingual impediment in the poem.
Mm.
Just is easy. The diction is so familiar, and it from that point of view, it's really extraordinarily smooth and masterful.
Yeah, masterful. I really agree. And I mean, Jane, it just seemed to me that her poetic instincts are so sure, are you know, there's no, I don't know, there's nothing. There's so little in her poetry and so little in this poem that I would say, oh, I think that's the wrong move. Everything seems so secure, so confident about what it's doing. When Wendell, your hand is up. Sorry.
Well, I for some reason I've been obsessing about I was cruel to him, and it is a bitter thing. The change in tense that it not it was a bitter thing. It is. It's just going to be with me.
Yeah.
And then I I I really love that. Now I'm a little hungry, but I distract myself from my hunger. It's trivial discomfort by paying attention to this, to the natural world around me, and the night that's going to silence the disturbances.
Right.
You know, it's
Right.
yeah.
And that the night is playing a part, is taking an active part
Yeah,
in
it's an act. Yes, yes.
it's not consoling. It's not calming her down, but it's bringing some kind of closure. Um, well, our time is almost up. I thought this was a wonderful discussion, and thank you. And Joyce, is there anything you would like to add?
I'm just very, very taken and touched by this wonderful discussion of this poem and what all of the readers found in it. I was very moved by it.
Yeah, yeah, good. Me too. Um, thank you all so much, Marita. Thank you for making this possible.